We're learning the Maamar on page 27 of Vayikra for kohen Isam. It's really a connection between there's three Maamarim that go one back to back, or really four Maamarim. The Sfartem Lechem, Vayikra for Oemer, Vayikra for kohen, and the beer. The beer is, in this case, sometimes the beer is like added, but in this case, it's almost impossible to understand the Maamar, or you see, one understands it very limited without the beer. That said, we're going to only learn the basics, and hopefully I'll remember what I learned in the beer and add it in when I can. Okay, so the pasuk is talking about, so again, there's the sphere Oemer, there's the cutting of the, first is the cutting of the carbon, the Ariel, and then we have the sphere Oemer, and then we have the carbonis of Shvuas, of Chag Bikurim. So the pasuk says at the end of the sphere Oemer, it says V'hein v'kohen oisem al lechem habikurim. Tenufa is that they did they rised up the bread and the part of the lamb al shnei kvasim. So there are two kvasim that was part of the sacrifice for Shavuos, and with that there was the lechem that they brought, which was out of chita. Unlike the lechem of the Oemer, which was out of se'orim, out of barley, the lechem, the carbon of Shavuos was out. So the pasuk says like this: the Gemara teaches us shalechem l'mayla, that the bread was on top, that he took the sheep together with the bread and did a hanafa, they did the lifting up. And the lechem was on top of the sheep. To understand the whole idea of this carbon and the connection between the bread and the carbon, the bread part of the carbon with the sheep part of the carbon, the animal. Basically, we have vegetation and animal, right? So the animal is the sheep, and the vegetation is the from the wheat. That they should be together in the elevation. That means they took the carbon in its full being, both the bread part and the animal part, and lifted it up. So the Rebbe says like this. The Alter Rebbe says like this. He didn't know that's known. Ki tachlis kol habriya, the point of creation, is lias hayesh batalayin. The whole point of why Hashem created this world is that there should be a yesh. There should be a concept. Hey Howard, a concept of a yesh, a person or a creation that feels that they're a yesh. Angels are also a yesh on a much more refined level than humans. So there should be the concept of a yesh, and the yesh is batal to the ayin. That's why the sun keeps on moving. It's in a way, like the Rambam says, it's moving constantly in a way of bowing. So the yesh has to be bottled to nullify itself to the nothingness of Hashem. What's the nothingness? The ayin, what we don't understand. It's the ayin from our perspective. The God is a ayin, is nothing, because we mean the ayin from nothingness. It means the world came from nothingness, from Hashem. We don't see it. But in truth is that we're nothing, and God is the true yesh. We're talking about from our perspective. So from our perspective, the idea of creation is the yesh should be nullified to the ayin. And there's every creation, the bria is a creation. Every creation, according to its level, has to nullify itself to the ayin. Ayin this way in an elevated sense, the nothingness of beyond basically our comprehension. So if it's an angel, which is much more refined from us, or other of creations in the different worlds, everything has to nullify itself. So we're human. So we're much more yesh. We feel much more disconnected. So for us, it's according each one to our level. It means even when we nullify ourselves, we're not nullifying ourselves into the level of an angel. So too within people themselves, there are people that are more refined, have more awareness. So when they're mevatel themselves, when they nullify themselves to Hashem, it's on a much more refined, higher level than maybe someone who's less understanding. But nevertheless, that person submits themselves, he or she, to Hashem. If you don't do an aveira, right? Sometimes it's a much higher level, but sometimes we're talking about something posh. It's simple. You walk into the store. The very fact that you're not going to buy non-kosher meat is because you submit yourself to Hashem. So the point of whole creation is lias hayesh batalayin, that the creation of yesh should nullify itself to the elevated nothingness of Hashem. And in each world, it's according to its level. And what is the nekuda? What is the point of this nullification? Huliyas batal is to be nullified. What does it mean to be nullified? So the Rebbe explains, to be included mamish in the infinite, light of the Ein Sof, of the infinite of Hashem. It means Ein Sof, there's no end. So the infinite of Hashem. When Yuchud by Yichud Gomer, and to be connected, Yuchud from the word Yichud, to be connected, to be one in an absolute oneness, but amiti in a true way, betachlis Yichud in an absolute oneness, bis achdus evari haguf ki his achdus, just like the limbs of the body is connected to the soul. Right? How do we know that there's a connection between the soul and the body? Because as long as the person's alive, the body functions. So when the nefesh hachiyunis, the life, the soul that gives life to a person, is together with the person, they don't say this is the soul and this is the person. This is the person. It becomes one entity. So just like that becomes one unification of soul and body, even though we know that there could be a separation. The very fact is when the person is no longer alive, the body doesn't disappear. But it's not. The body is dormant, doesn't move, and eventually decomposes. So its whole life force is from the soul, and that unification, just like there's a unification while the person's alive, that's how much a person has to become unified with the oneness of Hashem, the Ein Sof, the infinite, the level of Hashem, the way it's beyond creation, which is the Ein. What we don't. The reason why it's called nothing is because beyond our comprehension, we're finite. So we can't understand infinite. That the body has no other life besides the life force of the soul. It's like there's a secondary. That's this. The whole life is its soul, and if there's no soul, there's no life. Therefore, there's no conversation that the body has. The body can bring awareness to the soul, right? And assuming the soul is not aware, but the body can be awareness of the soul if the body's feeling pain, the body's not well, the body needs healing. There's parts of the body that is not well. It's a sign, first of all, on the connection between the body and the soul. So the body lets the soul know that I'm limited. You want me to run 100 miles? I can run. I would like to run 100 miles. I can't. But it doesn't. It's not. It doesn't have a. It can't disobey the soul. It says it has a bittul, total nullification to the soul. The kach tiyena, so too is the point. Ki tiyena koiches hanefesh achiyunis beteles v'nechos mamish bar in seif baruch hu asher makif al nafshay. So therefore, so too does the person as a person, God, a body and soul have to become one with the infinite power of Hashem. But Ari in seif, in the infinite power of Baruch Hu, blessed be He, which is the life force, which is shayru, which rests and encompasses the soul. So that's the purpose of creation. It's to nullify the yesh to the ayin. That's something, who you are, to nullify yourself to Hashem. And each person and each creation according to its level. And each world according to its level. And the higher worlds have much more understanding. Therefore, the bittul is much greater. The nullification is much greater. That's not, it means that's the way it should be. But within the teva, the nature of a person is not to nullify itself. And we don't find within a person this idea that you tell a person that should be natural. So we gave an example within the person themselves, that in body and soul, the body and soul are one unit when they're alive together. But outside of that relationship of body and soul, that one person, he or she, should nullify themselves totally to another person. Mamish in a way that doesn't question anything, right? Even a person could be a servant, a person could be a subject, a person could be a servant to the king, but that the person never questions in their mind and totally nullifies my want for the king's want. So that the Alter Rebbe says, "The Gemase any nims begashmis kla." We don't find such a thing. The vatal ritzonim pnei ratzon achem. That person should totally nullify one's wants. Ratzon is a want to the wants of others. Is bittul zet to such a level of self-nullification. As if you have no agenda of your own, no interest of your own, no ratzon of your own, nothing. Even a servant is to be a servant, or is to get paid, or is to have where to live, or whatever the reason. However, you are a servant. Hey, Sharna, we're on page 27, still on the left-hand side of the column, we're talking about the idea of the carbon bikurim, and to understand the carbon bikurim, which is connected of the bread and the lamb, which is part of the carbon of Shavuos, we're understanding the idea of bittul hayesh. So the Rebbe says bittul hayesh is to nullify oneself totally to the Or Ein Sof. But again, the paragraph starts it's not natural for a person to nullify themselves in such a way. There's no example where a person totally nullifies themselves to someone else. To totally nullify your want to the wants of others. In such a level. As if you have no personal agenda, no personal interest, no personal wants. But we do see that. A person doesn't have that, but animals have that. The animal has the ability to totally nullify. They have no ratzon of their own. Whatever their master tells them to do. They're totally nullified to the person who's leading them. Whatever it is that the situation is, whether it's in mowing or in hey Rebecca, or if it's in whatever the animal is listening to its master. Whatever the master wants, the one leading the animal, so too the animal goes with it. They never change. They never go. It means we're talking about traditionally. They never change what they're supposed to do. So here the Alter Rebbe is going to explain that if the whole purpose of creation is to nullify yourself, the yesh, your somethingness, to the nothingness, means beyond creation, from creation to beyond creation, and we don't find that within ourselves. It means that's the purpose of creation, but it's not natural for a person to totally nullify themselves, to have no ratzon to someone else. So, but we do find that in creation is by the animal kingdom. With the animal, a domestic animal, behema is a domestic animal. I'm talking about chayas here. I'm talking about domestic animal could totally be nullified to the shepherd, to whoever. So, but here he's saying it's not because the animal is a lower being. It's because it's a higher being. Because kisharshan v'isaidasan, because the root and the foundation of the animal is Baharei Kodesh, is in the higher levels of holiness. Therefore, they're able to have absolute bittul that a human being has a challenge having that bittul. Because its source, not the way it manifests maybe as an animal here in this world, but where it comes from. So it's in its DNA. Its source is coming from a higher place of the Ein Sof, and therefore it's natural for it to be mevatel itself. And at its root, the animal is totally nullified to the infinite, and therefore in this world also it has that characteristics. But the way it fell down into this world, it fell down, is adam. It's beneath the person. It means we look at the animal lower than the person from our perspective. But that's so therefore we say, well, we have Bechira, we could do things, right? But the animal, because it comes from a higher source, it has the main point of the creation. Again, what do you say the point of creation? The point of creation is bitol yesh laharatza, la'ayin, that the somethingness should nullify itself to the nothingness. So which means that the animal has that koyach much more than a human. Even if you say that I control the animal, I can make decisions for the animal. So here in this world, it's madregas adam, and it expresses its bittul to the person, but it's only because it has a bit. It's in its characteristics. It is the itself. Now he explains v'zeu inyan hakarbonis. This is what the idea of a carbon is. Means we're understand is why is there such a concept as a carbon? If a carbon means to become close to Hashem, so make yourself close to Hashem. What does that have to do with the animal? What's the animal's business if you need to get close to Hashem? Because you can't. You're limited to how close you can get to Hashem because it's not natural. For you, you're tapping into the energy of the animal. The energy that the animal has to be mevatel itself to the masters because it's mevatel itself to Hashem. And therefore you're riding on the energy of the animal to use that bittul for yourself. When they took an animal and sacrificed it on the altar, and its life force went back to its source. And what is its source? Bittul. That has its source is much more. It's a much higher level of bittul than the shoyrish of an adam. And therefore, through that elevation and that bittul and that bittul that's revealed when the animal gets sacrificed, so that helps the person in their journey of bittul. And what kind of animals were used as the sacrifice? There were different types of animal. Obviously, the cows and the sheep. We call behema v'lemin chayis, but it's domestic animals, not chayis, not wild animals. because wild animals have less bittul, as we see clearly, than domestic animals. Shebehema yesh ba bittul yes min a chaya. The behema has more. What means a chaya? We don't mean a non-kosher animal. A deer is a chaya. So therefore, a deer, a deer was never part of the sacrifice. So behema yesh ba bittul yes min a chaya. The behemoth, the domestic animal, has more bittul than the wild animal. Top of page 28. Now, of the domestic animals themselves, we're trying to get to understand the carbon of Shavuos, and of the domestic animal itself. Therefore, most of the carbonas are from sheep. It has even more self-nullification than even within the domestic animals themselves, let's say the cow or the goat. Because the cow itself is from the Pnei Shar, comes from in the image of the chariot that Yecheskel saw, which we're going to read about on Shavuos, is the Shar, the ox is from the Smoil. Smoil is left, Gevura. So we know the ox has some, and that kind of Gevura energy. Sometimes the ox could get angry and gore with its horns. Never mind the goats. Is also considered gvura, obviously in another level. But the nature of the sheep is all about compassion. They have that kind of passiveness. That's why it's brought down. It's other Memorim bring down about that is that there's the animal of the four animals that were on the chariot. Those represent the main ideas. You have the lion, which is the beast. You have the shar, which is the domestic animal, the cow. You have the nesher, which is from the bird kingdom, and you have Adam, the man, right? Possibly the greatest animal of all. So then, so if the carbon is from the keves, why isn't the keves? Why isn't the sheep? Why is it the ox that's on the chariot? It should be the sheep. So the answer is because in the bigger picture, the ox is the main animal. Even with its gvura and all that, that's the main characteristics that we want to find, that we're trying to harness out of the animal, which is the gvura, the power of the animal. We need there's in the behema, when we say the nefesh bahamis, the animal soul is part of the transformation is to use that energy in a positive way, but in consistency and reliability, even if the keves is a byproduct, so to say, is an offshoot of the shor, means it's part of the shor which sits on the chariot, but it's not the shor. It's one of the domestic animals is a keves. But there's the value here. The Alter Rebbe is pointing out the value of the keves. Like we say, that when it comes to the tamid, right? The tamid sacrifice, every morning, every afternoon, that consistency is in the keves. It may not be as productive. I mean, the person who has a shor character could achieve more in life than the keves personality. But there's something to say about the keves personality, and this is the focus of this minor. So he says, the main thing is the keves again. It has much more than the cow, which is the pnei hasharmi small. Even if the cow represents all the animals to the left side of the chariot, but it's bechinas gvuras. It's on the left side. It's gvura. It gores. Again, I'm repeating. The goats also more wild animals. Aval hakvasim hem bechinas rachme. The keves represents the rachmanis, the compassion. Like it says, v'haksavim hifrid Yaakov. This is again, we've learned this mimer a few years ago. The main part of the beer, again, this is one of the mimerim that's almost impossible to really understand the richness of the mimer without learning the beer. The beer is very long. The beer means the explanation. There's an explanation on this mimer. Where there, the Alter Rebbe goes into the whole concept of the difference between the keves and kesev. Sometimes we pronounce it, or it's written in the Torah, a kaf sin beis, that's kesev, and the tradition it's written in the Torah kaf beis sin, keves. So the pasuk says v'haksavim hifrit Yaakov. The Yaakov separated the ksavim. Shekvasim hem v'chinis midaysev sheYaakov. The sheep is in general the meat of Yaakov. That's Yaakov. Yaakov is Rachmanis. V'chinis rachmim. Like he says in the Maimer before, that the idea that it says Yaakov sherpadas Avram, Yaakov redeems Avram. Avram's chesed. The chesed, sometimes a person doesn't. He says in the Midah, in the Svartim Lechem, in the Maimer Svartim Lechem before, he says sometimes what's chesed? Chesed's love. What happens if you don't feel the love? You want to feel the love. You have nothing against God, but you want to feel love, but you can't. There's too much blockage there. So what do you do in your situation? So it's not that it's not hopeless. Then you have to awaken the Yaakov within you. You plead with God. You want God to have compassion on your soul. That's what we say. Have compassion on us. The same and let us understand. Let us feel something. So the ksavim hifrid Yaakov. Yaakov separated the sheep. The characteristics of the sheep is the midah of Yaakov, bechinas rachim, compassion. We know that the whole characteristics of a keves, of a sheep, is yesh them kol rachmanos, when their sound brings out compassion. Shemoyrim rachman, that a person feels compassionate. Because at their source, they're even higher. That level of submission is their bittul is so deep that they come from the highest of levels. Nevertheless, it's not the animal on the merkava. Shumakar rachman, the source of all compassion. Because at the end of the day, Rachmanis is a very powerful. There's midas that are very powerful as a midah, but when it comes to the ikar, when it comes to ma'aseh b'payil, Rachmanis may not be the strongest of characters. It's a compassionate characteristic, but it's not the most. A doer. Sometimes the person you're going to assign a job to is not the person that's feeling so bad, but the person, the one that has sometimes the shore characteristic, the goring characteristic. Not that the person should be a bully, but the idea sometimes you need to push something through. You need the characteristics of an ox versus the sheep. Because the source of the sheep comes from very high. The source of all compassion. Therefore, when we just said before, that the animals come down, and therefore in this world, the domestic animal is lower than humans. In the domestic animals, the sheep is lower. Their whole personality is about Rachmanis. Their voice awakens compassion. They're weak. They're not you're not going to call them as a strong. They're not a strong animal. And you see about them, they have that characteristics, led like sheep. That's the expression, led like sheep to the slaughterhouse, because they just move on. He says also, he adds in the brackets, there's the concept also of the wool of the keves, of the sheep. The wool also is a representation of something very high in the sources of the kedusha. You have to remember, everything is a creation of Hashem. So when Hashem, it says, God created the world through the Asar Mamaris, the 10 utterances, and through the manifestation in the midos, in the zah, in the zera amp, in the small complexion. So the way Hashem manifests in these midos, Teferes, which is Rachmanis, reaches to the highest point. So also the tzemer, even the tzemer, the whiteness of the wool means something. Which because of the Zohar, as the Zohar teaches us, Zohar Gadol calls it. Chelik Aleph Daf Mem Beis Amud Gimel Pasuk VeHevel Hevi Gam Hu Mibcher Sinai. It talks about over there the greatness of Hevel, the first sons of Adam, Cain and Hevel. So Cain, of course, killed Hevel eventually because of the success he had in his sacrifice. But the idea is that he sacrificed the wool, the sheep. Is Machshavte Havahu Asar the Itmer Bey, the Atik Yemin Yosef. That his idea was that he was connecting to the Vayatik Yemin Yosef was Eresha Ka'amar Neke, that talks about the old level, the deep level. Atik is the depth of the crown. Is this Eresha Ka'amar Neke, that the hair was white, that the whiteness, the simplicity of the color white represents a very deep level of a kuchabrichu b'machshavte toiv v'tzarf l'maisa begin da kibule. And therefore, because he knew that Hevel meant to connect to the essence of God through the representation of the whiteness of the hair of the sheep, so God accepted his carbon. The literal translation of that Aramaic is, it says over here, Hevel's thinking was, it says in footnote number 276, that God's garment is like white snow. And his hair was like white, is like clear wool. God liked what Hevel was trying to reach, and therefore he accepted his carbon versus the carbon of Cain. Okay, so therefore we understand now the idea of the animal, the idea of the carbon, the idea of the keves, that the sheep is the animal traditionally used for carbon. Now he says he's going to go into the idea of the keves and kesef, the samach before the beis or the beis before the samach. And the idea what he's trying to say is what is the idea of the carbon? The carbon is that what Alter Rebbe is going to get to over here is that after the spheres Omer, we count the 49 days of the Omer, we elevate ourselves. What are we elevating? The animal within us. We're elevating the 49 levels of our emotions. So when it comes to Chag HaShavuos and we complete the counting of the Omer, we're able to bring back the animal to its source of which is much higher than the human. But because it's only done through Torah, so therefore the two lechem, the shtei lechem that represents the Torah Shebesav and Torah Shebal Peh, like we know that l'chu lachmu b'lachmi, the Torah is compared to bread. So the lechem is on top of the keves. The emotions need to be controlled by the intellect, which is the Torah. But it all goes up together to elevate our avodas Hashem. Right? That's what he's going to explain in the final part over here in Sif Beis. V'hinei, he says, b'nefilas achayis l'mata b'gashmi is the way the animals come down in this world. So the sheep is called kevasim. Vav samach yud mem. Habeis koydem l'shin. The beis before the sin. What's the beis? The beis is chachma. Our emotions have to be controlled by our intellect. How do you build a home? Structure is with chachma. Is the gimel kavanam. And an extension of that, of the intellect, is the sin, which is, what is the sin? With the base and 3 lines, right? That's how we draw a sin. That's how we write a sin. So if you flip it upside down, the base gives the sin, and the emotions break out into the 3 categories of chesed, gvur, and tferes. So that's the way it is, that the chachma has to be the foundation. Your emotions run on intellect. You have to understand, you have to have control. That's only the way it is in this world. And in this world, we need that a mind over matter. We have to have the chachma over the midos, the moichin over the midos. But the way they are beyond means that's only because we're vulnerable. If we're going to have, means our emotions are much more powerful, but without control, they're vulnerable. So therefore, we have to have chachma first, the mind, moyach over midos. But the way they are in their purity, the midos are higher than the chachma. And therefore, it's kesev. The sin is above the base. The emotions are much more powerful. And therefore, it's not in its source, it's not vulnerable. And therefore, you could be the way you really are. And that's kesev. Hashin koydem lebase. Hashin hu midas al yoinish l'mayl machachma v'seichel. That's the emotions that are much greater than the seichel. Means the reason, the point of Adam is that's olam hatikun. What's olam hatikun? The world of fixing. That there's kelim gedolim, large vessels, small lights. Everything has to be proportionate, and there's a lot of control. A person has to exercise self-control because if a person runs on only on an emotional basis, so it could be very powerful, it could be very damaging. So, but at its source, where it's not vulnerable, he says, so the emotions are much higher than the chachma. They're called the dark mountains because they're mountains, but it's dark mountains. It's great. It's without any limitations. It doesn't have to be defined. It could be raw emotions. But Yaakov Avinu is the Olam Hatikun. So when the Ksavim came down, that's why it says the Torah says the Haksavim Hifrid Yaakov. Yaakov separated. He says no, it's not. We can't run like that. That's Esav, right? Esav is all emotion, and therefore there's tayu. Therefore there's chaos. Ksavim Hifrid Yaakov. Yaakov separated the Ksavim. He brings them down from their source to the world of separation. But he has to bring them to kvasim, because once they go to the world of separation, outside of their truth, so then they're vulnerable, because in the world of separation, then the emotions could get dictated or to get abused, so to say, or manipulated by the forces of evil. Because in order for that bittul that they have, the raw bittul that the animal has in its root, and in order for it to happen also in this world, it's more dangerous. Therefore, it has to be kvasim. Therefore, it says Yaakov separated the ksavim and made them kvasim. That's therefore, and where does it represent itself? It represents itself in the consistency. Consistency is a balance between your emotional power, your intellect over your emotion. You wake up in the morning, every morning you're there in shul. Every morning you do the carbon. so it has the emotions with the power of the intellect. That's why every morning you're there for chakras. Every morning you're there for Ma'ariv. What's the morning? The morning is the morning of Avram. That's Chesed. That's what everyone says that we know that in the morning it's a big time to give tzedakah because it's the time of Chesed. God expands His Chesed from the hot to the highest and to the lowest levels. But when it comes down, the Chesed comes down, and it manifests itself within and encloses itself within creation. And within creation, it's not also clear that everything is holy and good. Is yeshinika v'achiza leklipas. So then there's a siphoning. Yenika means to siphon off, to nurse off for the klipos, and they take advantage of the chesed. V'sitra achron, the other side, the linog me'akdusha, to siphon off, to suckle off from the holiness. Bechinas ale keder, to take into the wrong camps. Like Avram says, Li yishma yichel v'necha. Avram says, if he looks at the perspective as it comes down to this world, he says, let Yishmael also have chesed. But Yishmael is Yishmael, and Yishmael's chesed is damaging. Therefore, Avram says, whoa, Yaakov says, 1 second. We're in the morning, we're about to take in the energy of chesed. We have to turn it from kesef to keves. It has to be a controlled emotion. Shebechinas bittul, that it's taka, it's nullified to the Eibishter. Bechinas rachmanis, it's a compassion. Shlayimshach orin seif baruch hu rak bechinas bittul, that Hashem should only come down in a way where something is nullified to Him. Liyais orin seif shayru misgala b'misha batu love dafka, that the godliness only comes. That's the control. The Yaakov separated. He hifrid the saksavim. Therefore, Yaakov is the world of tikkun, the world of fixing. There's a keves hasheni, and the second korban. The Tasa ben Rebbe that we do in the afternoons, actually Tasa midasa shel Yitzchak. This is Yaakov making sure there's not too much gvura in the world. Gvura could be severe, and gvura gets very judgmental. So Yaakov says, "Whoa, time out. Let's sweeten this. We have to. Lamtika means to sweeten the judgment." And this that Yaakov turned the carbon, the tamarind, to the keves, not the kesef. In the morning and the afternoon, that the emotions of chesed go to the right places, and the gevura is in the right balance. Is nasai de Yaakov. This is all done through Yaakov. Shubriach atichon. He's the connecting force. Hamavriach min hakatza the katza, to connect the highest to the lowest levels. Because Yaakov is able to. Yaakov is the fixer, and in the fixing, he's able to take from the energy of the keves, which is the energy of bittul, but to be bittul in the proper way. Therefore, he separated them. He separated them from kesev, from the emotions being predominant, to being keves, that the intellect is predominant. He took them from their source and they brought them the way they're down into this world, in the world of separation. That it should be separate. And should be that there should be no longer kesev and keves. Because Yaakov says, of course, we have to bring emotions into our avodas Hashem. Of course, we have to feel the love, but we have to have it under control. We have to constantly remember what's chacham and bina. Chacham and bina is constantly, it's like it says, it's nekuda beichalai. You have to focus. You know what the purpose is. So you have to stay with. Even though a person says the limitations of the mind is limiting my ability of experience, but the risk of not having that in that way is too strong, is too great. But that's all on a day-to-day basis. But what happens when we complete our Avodah? When we're able to go through the 49 days of the Oemer in this level of balance between mind and emotion, comes the holiday of Shavuos. V'hein if hakohen oisem al halechem al shnei hakvasim. But then we take all our midos and we bring them up. Hanafa means to lift up. We lift it all upwards to its source. Back to the place where the emotions. That means it's not a permanent idea. The idea is that for us in this world, in the space that we're in the complications that we're in our own life, so then we have to be guarded to have the intellect controlling the emotions. But in the situation, but Shavuos, when we complete that. So then it's an elevation to the level of ksavim. That's when we take the bread We haven't explained what that is yet. The Alter Rebbe has explained what the bread is, but we're taking the animal and bringing it back up from keves to kesef. So we go full circle. Yaakov separates the ksavim to kevasim. And after our avodah, we bring it back. We're solid enough. And we'll explain how to have back to kesef and why. So then he says, Ki'inyin hatinu f'shtei lechem. What is the bread that gets elevated with it? Ki'inyin beis lechem rhymes as this two breads represents Torah shebechsav, Torah shebapeh, the oral and the written Torah. Go out and get the bread. The bread is Torah. The bread is a very high level. Within the breads themselves, there's two loaves of bread. There's the Torah shebechsav, the written law, which is much higher than the Torah shebapeh, the oral law. When he says, what is, it's an amazing thing. What is the great, that's why sometimes if you open the Siddur, the old Siddurim or the original Siddurim, you'll see that sometimes there's the trup in the davening itself. Like if you can open up a Siddur, proper Siddur, sometimes I think the old Machzerim used to have the trup, the timim is the trup, the notes that the Baal Korah sings when one reads the Torah, right? There's notes. We don't just read the Torah, we read it with a song. The song has a specific notes. And sometimes we'll find, even in the Siddur, they'll put the notes in. They used to put it in on Shema, on Hoshana and Kippur. They put it in for the Rabbeinu Tam. Why? So he says, because the notes is not just a note, a way to sing the Torah. The notes are much deeper than we know when it comes to letters and notes, the notes are much greater than the letters. So he says, that the Torah Sheb'Ksav has what the Torah Sheb'Ksav, but there's no notes to the oral Torah. But we need a ta'amim, that's the notes of the Torah. Zarka, Makav, Shofar, Hailech, Segolta. These are all the different notes of the reading of the Torah. Shehem Bechinas Nigun, that creates a song. Bechinas Metikus V'Tainig. What is the song? The sweetness of Torah. The song was 50,000. Shira Imi, that the song keeps me even through the night. Why do you sing something? Because of the great pleasure you have in it. You're not just saying it. You're singing it. It's alive within you, the Torah. And where do we have the notes? The song is only in the written Torah, not in the oral Torah. And the Alter Rebbe says even more, that we don't even have an understanding of the notes. Sometimes the Alter Rebbe mentioned the reason why there's this note on this word is to emphasize X, Y, and Z. But in general, we don't have a proper understanding of the notes. It's beyond our comprehension. But what is the oral law? The second loaf of bread. It's the oral law that explains us the written law, because even the words we don't understand without the oral law. We don't understand what the mitzvahs are properly unless we learn the Torah Shebapeh, the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Halacha. Where's the explanation of the words? Is in the oral Torah. We don't understand properly how to behave in the Torah mitzvahs, the 630 mitzvahs just from the written Torah. There's not one mitzvah, the Alter Rebbe says. In the written Torah, that we don't need the Talmud and Mishnah to explain us what the verse means. What does it mean to make tzitzis? What does it mean to make tefillin? What does it mean to keep the laws of kosher, etc., etc.? So all the laws that's brought down, all the six Mishnayos, and then on that we have the Talmud, and then we have all the poskim in the commentaries. But comes Shavuos, it all comes together. We take it all together. We take the emotions, the two loaves, which is the Torah Sheb'Chsav and Torah Sheb'Peh, and everything gets elevated. But Shavuos, it comes the holiday of Shavuos. Manif and Beis Bechinas Halachem. We take both the loaves of Torah. In their source, that it also gets elevated to the infinite energy of Hashem. Because in the level of the essence, the bread is the Torah is mamish one with Hashem. Iu, God, v'chayehu, and His energy, the light, is all one. And the Torah is the light. Hu hayadeya, He is the one who knows, v'hamada, the one that is known. And through the Torah, here he says it very short, and here he goes into major explanation. And where do we see it? Just like we said, the animals are higher than humans because they come from a higher source, and therefore they fall lower. Whatever is higher falls lower. So vegetation is even higher than the animals, and it falls even lower, that the animals eat the vegetation. But when it comes to elevation, we want to bring the animals back to the source. How do we do it? It's only through Torah. So through the two loaves of Torah Shebeksav and Torah Shebapeh. We're able to bring the keves, the emotions of our service, and if we want to free our emotions from the Chachma Bina, from the bays, that the mind that limits the emotion. How do we really free our emotions to be able to be only serving Hashem is through Torah? And then it could really be nullified to its source. Everything should be nullified. And therefore he says, and therefore when it comes to Shavuos, the two breads of Shavuos says, they are leavened bread. What's the whole reason why we have matzah unleavened bread? So again, he's talking short. It's much more explained in the explanation, and all the Maimarim of Pesach. The Pesach, because we're at the beginning of the journey, the bread, if the bread were to rise, chametz is the rising of the bread, represents one's ego. You're not strong enough to eat chametz. But when it comes after the 49 days of the Omer, and we refine ourselves, and now we're bringing everything back to Hashem, specifically it's chametz. Because we go back to the source. We go back to the source of creation that created that there should be a separation, something from nothing. To the place of misnasim means elevated from all days of the world. That's the source of their life and vitality. And because only the source of the light, so to say, hides itself from creation. So the therefore they're created in such a way where they feel separate. But when you go back to the source, before it's separate, that we feel we're something. But when we go back to our source, it's much above the days of the world. Then we get elevation. We go back to our source, so we get a major elevation. And therefore, chametz is not a problem. It's actually, the chametz is a holy chametz, where in the time of Pesach, it's a dangerous chametz. And now we understand the difference between the two sheeps that are sacrificed on Shavuos, Atzeres and Shavuos, than the Tamid that are every day. The keves of holiday of Shavuos is a carbon shlamim, a carbon of peace. And that also those who bring it get the kohen eat from it. They're oilers. They have to be totally burnt because we're still in the middle of our Avodah, and therefore we have to totally submit ourselves to Hashem. We're not able to, so to say, take joy in our bittul because then it's dangerous. The regular sheep, the way it's keves that comes down and we do to the world of separation. We can't. It's too dangerous to give it to eat to the kohanim. Therefore, the Talmud sacrifice has to be totally sacrificed to Hashem. Our bittul is totally sacrificed. If we start to take part in the bittul itself ourselves, then it could be siphoning off to the powers of the other side. But after the 49 days of the Omer, so the one time of the year comes Shavuos. We're able to elevate it even higher than the name of Yud Kevavke, which is the name of creation. And back to their source, the way they're written, Kesev, not Keves. The Gam and included with that is the two Torahs of Torah Shebeksav and Torah Shebapeh. There's no way for the evil forces to take energy. Therefore, they're carbon shlamim. Even the owners, meaning the kohen, eat from it as a representation of the Jewish people, and that's the idea of the carbon of Shavuos. Right, everyone, Laila Tov and Shavua Tov, and everyone have a happy Pesach Sheni for those who we don't see before them. Take care.